Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Praetorian and welcome back to my Hearts of Iron 4 beginner guide. Now in this video we're going to be covering the different types of land units as well as division templates. Now I know many people are already familiar with the unit types, so if you already feel very comfortable with those, I'm going to go ahead and add an annotation into this video. So if you have annotations on, that should allow you to skip right to the division templates. Alright, for those of you guys who are still here, before we start covering the unit types, I would like to define a few terms that we're going to be using throughout this video regarding combat stats. I do want to make sure that you guys are familiar with these stats and what exactly they mean. Now the first two here are soft and hard attack. Now every unit has a soft to hard ratio that determines how much of percentage of these values they're going to take when they're being attacked. So for instance, if this unit here was to attack a unit that was 100% soft, basically it's maybe just infantry and artillery, then we're going to be using 100% of this, 110.5 against that unit and none of our hard attack ability. However, if we were attacking a much more harder unit that was maybe 50% hard and 50% soft, then we'll be using 50% of this 110.5 attack and 50% of this 16 against them. Next is air attack, which is of course how much damage we do against airplanes. Very simple. Defense. This is how many attacks your unit is able to avoid while on the defense. While breakthrough is the exact opposite, it's how many attacks you can avoid while you're on the offense. Now armor and piercing, basically piercing is your ability to penetrate armor. If your armor rating, or if a unit's armor rating is above the unit that they're fighting's piercing rating, then they're going to get several bonuses, they're going to take less damage, and they're also going to do more damage. That's a very important factor. They do more damage as well. So you want your armor rating to be higher than the enemy's piercing rating. Next we have initiative. This makes your unit quicker to reinforce into a battle, and they also are quicker to get their planning done. And that can be very advantageous, let you to enact your battle plans quicker, or even if you weren't going to wait until the planning was fully done, when you finally do enact it, you're going to have an overall higher planning rating, which means that you're going to get a better attack modifier. So that, and those attack modifiers can be very significant, so initiative can be very helpful. Entrenchment, is pretty self-explanatory, and then combat width is one that we're going to be going into later. So that basically gives you guys the gist of those those combat stats. Now let's go ahead and take a look at all the individual units here. Now you have two types of basic infantry here. You have your regular land unit infantry, and then you have motorized infantry. Now, the major difference between land and motorized infantry is, first of all, of course, there's the speed aspect of it. Motorized infantry are a lot faster, so you're going to want to use them for any kind of advanced maneuvers where you're going to be requiring speed. You're also going to be using your motorized units in all of your armor divisions. And when we go into division templates, we'll discuss that more in detail. Now, there are two other differences between the basic leg infantry unit and the motorized unit. First of all, you're going to notice that they have some attack negatives for when they're attacking into certain terrains. They also have some movement negatives here for certain terrains, forest, jungle. So that's something else to consider. Basically, leg units perform better in difficult terrain. And then the second thing is that motorized units use more supply, so that can be significant if you're having supply issues. Now let's go into the special forces here. They're all very self-explanatory. I really don't need to go into them too much here. Marines are basically for your amphibious assaults. You'll notice they'll get some bonuses when they're attacking in a marsh, river, or across a river, or doing amphibious attacks. Then we also have the mountain infantries, and they're basically the same thing, except for they're in hills and mountains. And then finally you have paratroopers, which allow you to basically do paradrops behind enemy lines. They can be very useful. I enjoy using paratroopers. We're going to skip support battalions for now and go right to armor. Now you have three types of armor. You have light, medium, and heavy. Now light tanks have three really good advantages here. First of all, they're very fast. Light tanks have the best speed of all the tanks. All tanks are going to increase the hardness of your division, which can be very important because a lot of units will not have good hard attacks. So you can use that to ensure that your division takes less damage overall. So high speed, good hardness here, And then finally, they have a very, very good breakthrough. Breakthrough, this is just awesome. This is the amount of, this is basically their defense when they're on the attack, and it's just very, very good. That's one of the best parts about tanks, and they're meant to be used on the offensive and not on the defensive. And so that's light tanks for you. They're also, they're not going to require too many resources compared to these other types of tanks, so that's another advantage of the light tank. However, light tanks, they don't have a very good heart attack. Their piercing is okay, and they don't have very good armor either. So that's when you're going to want to use these medium tanks. Medium tanks have some of the advantages of the light tanks. They're also pretty fast for a unit. They're definitely a lot slower than the light tanks, of course, but you'll notice they have the same breakthrough rating here, so they're very good with the breakthrough rating. They have a good armor rating. They have a good piercing rating. Their soft attack versus hard attack is very balanced, like 15 and 14, which means that they're going to be good in any scenario. Really, these are my units right here. Medium tanks are where you're going to want to be at. This is what you're going to use to fight the enemy tanks. They can be used to fight enemy infantry. Medium tanks are just a very good balanced unit. Now, heavy tanks. This is one that I would suggest that you avoid. Heavy tanks, they're very good. If you look at, this is the old style, but let's look at the Tiger here. You'll see they are very, very good. They have very high armor ratings, very high piercing rating, breakthrough even higher than the medium tanks. The soft attack really isn't that good for what you're investing in it, but hard attack is pretty good. And overall, you're going to get very good hardness rating on your division. So, all that is respectable, but the negative to the heavy tanks is how much resources and production they require. It's just not worth it at all, in my opinion. I sometimes use them in a role playing. I'm playing as Germany or I'm playing as Soviet Union, because frankly, it's cool to have these really cool heavy tanks. I enjoy having the Tigers and the King Tigers. It's fun, but really when it comes down to efficiency, to optimization, heavy tanks, you can avoid them. Do remember that the Allies won the war, and in the Western Front, they did not use heavy tanks. The Allies, Americans, they concentrated on light and medium tanks, and they did just fine. And I would tell you that you can do that in this game and you will be fine. And instead, to deal with the enemy's heavy tanks, you should use tank destroyers, anti-tanks, or just outnumber them with medium tanks. Now let's move into artillery here. Now artillery is really, really good for their soft attack. That's where they benefit. They have just a fantastic soft attack. They can really add to the offensive capabilities of your units. I would suggest that you consider always adding artillery. I love artillery. It's one of my favorite units in the game. And then on top of that, I forgot to mention, they have a pretty good breakthrough here. That's not bad at all. So that gets added to your division. Now next, you'll see that we have anti-air units. Now, of course, anti-air units are, going to have a very good air attack. They're good for shooting down planes. However, do not underestimate their ability. They have far more uses than just anti-air. Adding an anti-air unit into your division, specifically your infantry divisions, can increase their heart attack and their piercing rating significantly. So this is something you should consider doing. Even if you have air superiority, then it certainly does decrease the utility of the anti-air unit. But even then, they still do have some use. And if you don't have superiority, I would say this is just even more reason right here to consider adding them into your divisions. And then next we have the anti-tank unit, and their utility is in the name. They are basically to counter enemy tanks. Now they can add quite a bit of piercing and heart attack to your units. Essentially, they are just to increase your piercing and your heart attack ability so that you can fight off enemy tanks. And then last here we have the rocket artillery. Now there's a few differences between rocket artillery and just a regular artillery here if we were to take a look at them. Now if you're looking at the artillery here, the defense is 15, while the rocket artillery is 12. Soft attack 40, while 50 over here. You'll notice that the artillery has a higher piercing as well as a higher heart attack, and the breakthrough rating for the rocket artillery is higher. So when looking at this, we can pretty much get the gist of exactly what the difference between these is. Rocket artillery, with their higher breakthrough and their higher soft attack, is going to be better on the attack, on the offensive, than artillery, while artillery is better on the defensive with their higher defense. And they're also going to be slightly better at fighting armored and hard units, just slightly. Which ones you decide to use in your division is going to be largely dependent up to your own preference. Now, all these units are very, very slow, so you're not going to want to use these specific units here in your motorized divisions or in your armored divisions. You're going to want to have self-propelled versions of these. So how do we get the self-propelled versions? Now, I've showed this in a previous video, but I'm going to go ahead and cover it again because it's real quick. You're going to be using your tank units here, their models, and you'll see on all the sides here we have these little buttons here, and each one of them is going to allow us to use this model for a certain artillery type of support unit here. So this first one here is going to give you tank destroyers, that's self-propelled anti-tank, and then this one's going to give you self-propelled artillery, and the last one here gives you self-propelled anti-air, so that your support units can keep up with your motorized divisions and your armored. Now, rocket artillery is not on this screen. Instead, you're going to have to go to infantry, and there's a little button right here to research motorized rocket artillery. Now, the last unit types we're going to be covering is the support battalions here. Now, the first one up is the engineer company. This is a favorite of mine. Engineer companies, first of all, they increase the entrenchment of your units, which can be very, very good on defense. They will also increase the movement speeds through many different difficult terrains, using marsh and forest. They also increase your defense. That's the most significant thing, is they're going to increase your defense in all these different terrains here. And then you'll notice that a few of these terrains, they actually increase your ability to attack on that terrain, for instance, the forts and amphibious attacks. So engineer units can be vital on the defense, but they're also very, very useful on the offensive as well. And as you research them, they're going to increase their entrenchment ability, but they're also going to increase your ability to attack and defend certain things. So the first one here is fort, and then you'll see against rivers, and then you see urban attacks. So very, very useful, I find, that the engineer companies. Next is the recon company. Now, I personally am not a big fan of the recon company. The main thing that they do is increase your reconnaissance ability. Now, when two divisions go up against each other, they will select combat tactics, and which combat tactics they select is largely based off of their general. Or I should say their general's ability. Now, every combat tactic has a counter, and a general is going to attempt to select the counter that his enemy is using, and if he does, it's going to give him a very significant bonus. So those are very important, and reconnaissance improves your ability to select good tactics. So while this can be beneficial, I have found that just having good leaders is really all I need in that field, and I'm not saying that recon units don't have use, but I largely ignore them. It's just not important enough for me. I feel that having the better leaders works just fine. Then you have military police. Now, military police is going to increase the suppression bonus of your units. Now, this is great for all your garrison units, specifically if they're stationed in a location where you're going to have lots of partisan activity that you have to worry about. So yeah, put those in your garrison units. Then we have maintenance companies. Maintenance companies will increase the reliability of your division and the equipment that's being used in that division. Now, this can be critically important in the long game because overall, you're going to be losing a lot less equipment to attrition. This is especially important if you're putting in a unit that has certain types of equipment that are very expensive to produce. For instance, in your armored units have maybe medium tanks that are very, very expensive. This is huge. I always put this in my armored units. So reliability, I really like maintenance companies just for the sole fact of being able to decrease the rate of attrition on your equipment. Next up, one thing I did forget to mention, recon company, they do increase the speed of your movement through these terrains. I should mention that as well. So it's not their only benefit, the reconnaissance. They do have this as well, so that's something to consider. But like I said, engineers do that for me, so I would rather have engineers over the recon company. Field hospitals essentially do the same thing that maintenance company does for equipment. They do it for manpower with your trickle back percentage here. This means that less of the men that you lose are going to be lost forever. 20% of them here are going to return to your manpower pool, which is the manpower pool is critically important, especially if you're one of the Axis powers. So this can be very significant. Another thing is the experience loss. When your units lose men and they replace them with green rookies, they're going to lose a little bit of experience, and this is going to decrease that a little bit, so it just helps your units retain some of the experience as they take combat losses, and that could be important in the long run as well. Logistics reduces supply usage of your division. This can be very important if you're having supply troubles in certain areas. There are many areas where supply can be difficult, for instance in the desert, and logistic company can just help you out, just deal with some of those supply problems that you may have in those areas. And then finally we have the signal company. The signal company increases the initiative, which we already discussed, but yeah, that just increases that by 5%. So when it comes down to it, out of all these support units, all of them I feel have their usefulness. I don't like the recon units, but other than that, I find myself using all of them in certain situations. They can all be very good, and it really just depends on your preference and your demands, what you need. All right, so that covers our overview of the unit types, and now we're going to look at division templates. Now, when we're talking about designing your own divisions, the key statistic here that has to be discussed, this is the critical statistic, is combat width, or often called frontage, due to that's what it was called in previous games. Now, the magic number for combat width is 40. Now, the reason for that, let me explain real quick. Now, combat width is your ability to get your units into combat and actually fight the enemy. Now, if we were to attack in the Now, terrain can decrease the combat width of an area. Usually the forest does not, so in this instance, we're going to have the maximum combat width, which is 80 when we're attacking this guy in this province. Remember, 80 is the maximum combat width. Now, you can attack this province from other areas, and that's going to increase the combat width by 40. So if I attacked from here, that's going to increase it from 40, and if I attacked from here, that's also going to increase it by 40. So that's why 40 is the magic number. You never want a division above the size of 40 when it comes to their frontage. So 40 is the magic number, guys. Never ever build a division bigger than 40. There's just no reason for it. However, a division of 40 combat width is very, very large, very expensive to build, and I would suggest that you would be better off not going with a combat width of 40. Instead, you should build much smaller divisions between a combat width of 10 to 20, around 10 or 20. Now, I personally prefer for my main infantry divisions to be a combat width of 20. Now, the reason why we'd rather have 2 divisions of 20 over 1 division of 40 is because of these support units right here. Now, there's 2 key things that we need to talk about when it comes to the support units, and you can see them right here in the tooltip. First of all, they do not affect the max speed of your units. Now, this can be very important when you're wanting to add some artillery to your faster units, but you do not have self-propelled artillery. Then you can add some support artillery into your motorized division without slowing down the rest of the division. So that's a very significant thing to consider. Now, the other thing is that these do not increase your combat width. This is very, very important. They do not increase your combat width. I'm going to repeat that again. They do not increase your combat width. This is going to be on the test, guys. You might want to remember that. So basically that means if we throw support artillery in here, which remember, artillery are very, very good at increasing your soft attack. So if you have 1 division with a 40 combat width and I have 2 divisions of a 20 combat width, that means that I have more support artillery than you do, which means I have a higher soft attack because each of my divisions can have that support artillery, and they can each overall have more support units because we have 2 divisions. Therefore, my 2 divisions are going to be better than your 1 division of 40 combat width. That's why a combat width of 20 is a very good one to do. If you wanted smaller divisions for whatever purposes, then 10 can work as well. Now, there is one exception I should mention. If you have a general who has a specific trait, the offensive trait, this trait decreases the unit frontage by 10%. That means that the divisions under that specific general could actually be much larger combat width. So for instance, our divisions of 10, instead of being at 10 with the 10%, we can make those with the combat width of 11, or our main divisions that we have a combat width of 20 could have a combat width of 22. So that is one exception that I should mention if you have any generals that have that specific trait. So let's go ahead and use what we know to design some units here. Now I'm going to do a little bit of cheating here just in case we need any experience. I don't know that we will. And go ahead and max out our experience, and that's how you do that, by the way, if you're wondering. If you wanted to do some cheating and do some division designing right from the get-go. So let's go ahead and design a new infantry division. Our base one here is looking pretty good. You could use that, but you notice that we're not using our full combat width. So we could just simply add another infantry unit, and then we're at our new magic number of 20. And this right here is a solid unit to use with the support units. You'd obviously want to add some support units. We don't have all the ones unlocked that I may want to put in here, but you could put the specific support units in them that fit for your preference. And this is not a bad unit. However, for me, this soft attack is just a little bit too low. So this 10 infantry battalion division is just not going to work. We're going to remove that. And we're going to remove this guy, and we're going to remove this guy. Instead, we're going to replace them with 2 artillery. Now, this gets us at our magic number of 20, and you're going to notice that our soft attack has increased significantly. Just adding these 2 artillery units has just increased the offensive capabilities of our division by quite a bit. This is really one of my preferred division types. I really like using this, and it's basic, and it works. Now, we can use this same division here and just alter it a little bit. If we needed to create a division that is better able to handle some of the many challenges that it could face in combat. For instance, like units with a heavy hard percentage here. If you notice, our hard attack is not very high at all. We also don't have a very good air attack. We have an air attack of 0, meaning that this unit's not going to be destroying any planes. And if we had in a situation where the enemy has air superiority, then that could be a problem. And what we're going to do is we're just going to remove one of our infantry. Now, just to look at this, we currently have 7 infantry and 2 artillery. We're going to remove one of those, so we have 6 infantry. And then we're going to add anti-tank unit and anti-air. And just like that, we're still sitting at our combat width of 20, but we have significantly increased our hard attack, and we have a good air attack now to defend against planes. And then on top of all that, we also have increased our piercing ability. So this division right here is a very good model. This is one of my preferred ones. Of course, once again, I will emphasize that the support units have not been filled out because we don't have all access to them all right now in 1939 because Germany has failed to research those. I would have already researched many of them by now. But yeah, this is a good model right here for your basic leg division. Now let's take a look at a motorized unit. Now once again, you see the motorized unit is not using the optimum combat width, and just like the leg unit, we could just add another motorized infantry and be at the magic number. And this is not a bad unit. However, I would much prefer to change it, and just like the regular infantry, you could change all this, get it at 14, and add 2 self-propelled artillery. The thing you have to remember is that self-propelled artillery, or any artillery, is going to be a combat width of 3, while your infantry, your tanks, pretty much most everything else is going to be a combat width of 2, and then anti-tank and anti-air, those specialized type units, are only a combat width of 1. And so if we had the self-propelled versions of all those, then we could add those in here and basically build it to be the same as the infantry unit, except for this is going to be a mobile unit that is very, very fast. So yeah, the motorized division is basically the same as the leg. Now let's talk about armor divisions. Now you should never, ever, ever, ever use a unit that is purely armor battalions, ever. If you do that, you will lose. They actually have very, very low organization. So you do not want to have a unit, armored unit that is just armored battalions. Now you can see that the vanilla unit also includes motorized infantry in here, and this is not a bad build, but you can see that we're not using the maximum combat width of 20 that we're going to want to use. So we're going to want to fill this out just a little bit. Now, I personally prefer having some medium tanks in here. We already have a light division. I don't think they're using any division that uses medium tanks here. So we're going to go ahead and put some medium tanks, not heavy. And then we'd want a self-propelled artillery unit. We'd want 2 of them, and that would get us up to 20. Now, this model is not bad. It's not bad. The organization is a little bit lower than I would like it. So I would probably remove one of these light tanks here and instead add a motorized infantry, and that increases the organization quite a bit. And this is my preferred model right here. I like 3 armored units. Now if you're wanting a really heavily armored unit with 4 battalions, you can of course do that, but I would not suggest that you remove one of these motorized infantry. Instead, you should probably remove the one of your artillery units and replace it with your tank battalion, and then you'll have one combat width left. And with that, I would suggest that you get a tank destroyer. You get a tank destroyer, and basically you're going to have a unit that is going to have a very, very, very heavy hard attack, a very, very good armor and piercing. and it's basically going to be a very good anti-armor division. With the removal of that artillery, you're going to have a much lower soft attack, but like I said, you're building your division to specifically fight other armored units. But this would be a good model here. 3 armored units, 4 motorized infantry, and then the 2 artillery. And we don't have the self-propelled artillery right now, so I can't throw them in there, but that would be the basic model there. Now, one thing that I think is important to mention in this video here is that your organization, your armor rating, and your piercing rating are all an average. So if you add a unit in there that increases organization, such as the motorized infantry that we were seeing before when we were doing these armor division, it's going to increase the organization of the entire unit. Likewise, if you add a unit that decreases organization, that's going to hurt your whole unit. And the same thing for armor and piercing. So that's something to consider, is that those are all averaged out between all the battalions that are in your current division. While the other statistics are more additives, you add a unit and then it's going to add on to that rather than be an average of all of your units. So something to consider when you're building your divisions out. Now, one thing I was going to cover is talk about some of the specific types of designs I like using for like specialty type designs, but unfortunately, like for dealing with certain situations and stuff, but unfortunately I'm a crappy planner and I should have played through the game a little bit and gotten us to like a later date so that we'd have access to all of the different unit types. But yeah, I didn't do that, so we don't have access to that, and so that's unfortunate, but I would hope that you guys get the gist of it. The important things that I really want to get across here is the ideal of frontage or combat width, and that you should try and have your divisions have a combat width of around 20, or for smaller divisions, like I said, 10. Now, I've also heard the number of 14 being thrown around because, as I said before, your frontage can be affected by the terrain. And so when your frontage gets decreased due to terrain, I've heard that 14 can kind of deal with that a little bit better, but I don't know. I've used 20. I prefer 20. That works for me, and 10 for the smaller units. I haven't tested 14 myself, but if you wanted to, you could always do that as well and see how that works for you. And then finally, the last thing I'd like to mention is when you're building specialty units, and this would have been covered if I had better planned this, but when you're building specialty units, you know, whether it's a mountain division or paratroopers, or you're attempting to build a unit that is designed around speed, then you should always consider the support type, the support units that you're adding, both over here and here, and make sure that they're not going to impact in a negative way the trait that you're building that specific division around. So if you're building a division that is very good at fighting in the mountains, then you're not going to want to put units in here that are going to decrease your ability to fight and move in the mountains. So it's something you should consider, especially when you're building like your mountain divisions here. Alright guys, so it is unfortunate that I wasn't able to cover some of those little specific specialty designs that I like to do, but we did get through all the basics of designing your divisions here, and I did cover this whole entire screen in a previous video, which is why I didn't go over all of this stuff again. And then also, one thing I haven't mentioned in any video is this here. This is what I'm talking about, specialized units here. You can see this division template cannot be parachuted. So if we're wanting to build a unit that parachute, we're not going to want to add stuff that, you know, can't be parachuted in, you know, like heavy tanks or something like that. So like I was saying, make sure when you're building specialty divisions that you're making sure to keep in mind how they're going to impact your division and its ability to do your job that you're assigning it. Alright guys, so if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing to our channel. Alright guys, thanks for watching.